Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Stonethorn and in this video I'll be showing you my Magicka Dragonknight PvP build for the Stonethorn patch. During the Greymoor patch I got asked literally hundreds of times why I have not released a MagDK build. Main reason for that was I felt the top MagDK builds of the patch were hard carried by either Malakat, Grottar, or Elfbane, or any combination of those, and I really dislike the slow pace, zero mobility playstyle that comes with most of these builds. This patch, however, with the return of Bloodspawn, the buff to Cog, I just felt like I can make a MagDK build that fits my own playstyle, which is super fast, super bursty, with good sustain and survivability, but isn't limited to slow kills versus enemies who are bad enough to stay in melee range. This build is able to keep up with faster, more mobile classes more than any other MagDK build I've seen around. I absolutely love it, and I hope you will too. Come over, boyos. I know there's like 5 of you in stealth right behind this boy. I know it. I know it. I know it. I'm gonna yoink him anyways. Is my leap gonna work? Yes. 14k! Easy 14k Molten Whip. And you guys are always telling me Flame Lash is the way. 14 fucking k damage. Let's go, baby. Starting off with the stats, our max Magicka is at 23k or 24k on the back bar. Our max health is at 27k and our max stamina at 17k. So very good max pools for a light armor Magicka based build this patch. Our Magicka recovery is at 1200 and our stamina recovery at 600. However, despite those both seeming a little bit low, especially for a Magicka based build on Magicka regen, we have a lot more additional heals of sustaining both Magicka and stamina on this build, so we're able to cast skills freely, block a whole lot, and still sustain really well. We will get to how we sustain so well on this build despite these stats in just a moment. Our health recovery is also at 1k, which is really nice because we're able to sustain about 500 health every single second while not healing even, just from our health recovery, which helps us a lot as MagDK heals are a little bit on the low end compared to other classes. Our spell damage on the front bar, even when unbuffed, is at 2300. However, when we are fully buffed, we get to a 4.1k spell damage. Keep in mind that while our spell damage is a little bit lower than it was in previous patches, our uptime on our full buff is a lot higher. Due to Burning Spell Weave losing a little bit of its spell damage but gaining a lot more consistency, while our peak spell damage is a little bit lower than it used to be in previous iterations of my MagDK builds, our uptime on our buffed spell damage is going to be a lot higher on average, and so we will be able to get a lot more damage done despite our max spell damage when fully buffed being a little bit lower. Our spell critical is at 43%, which is very relevant considering as we're not using Malakat on this build. I know, shocking. Our spell resistance when we are fully buffed on the back bar, spell resistance is at 29k and physical resistance at 22k. However, we also have Bloodspawn to give us 3.6k more resistances to both of these. So when we are really fully buffed, we are at over 32k spell resistance and over 25k physical resistance, which is really nice to have. Our crit resist is also at 2500, which is not insane but is very decent for our build, and our spell penetration is at 5k without even having elemental drain applied. So obviously with it, which I will explain a little bit more about when we get to the skills, we actually have 10k penetration on this build. So our offensive stats are great, our defensive stats are fantastic for a light armor build, and our max pools are great as well. So let's get into the sets and I'll explain how our sustain works in this build as well. Jumping into the sets, we are using once again our trusty Bloodspawn. They nerfed it and they brought it back, and we still love this set despite all the changes it's been through. It is the fantastic, perfect set to have on a Dragonknight since it generates ultimate for you, it gives you better stam sustain, and it gives you resistances. Really, what more can you ask for? Yes, the set has been through a lot, but it is still just the perfect thing for Dragoknights because of the ultimate sustain, which gives us a whole lot, since for Dragonknight, our ultimate means sustain, our ultimate means damage, our ultimate means defense, so it's really everything we can ask for a monster set. We are also using one piece armor of the trainee this patch. The reason for that is that with only one piece of this set, we can get 1.4k more max health. That is literally it, the single reason, since we have one available piece that we can use this set on, we are choosing to use it. It's the only set in the game that has a one-piece bonus that is not a monster helm or a mythic, and it is a fantastic bonus to have to increase our max health and our survivability. We are using on the front bar 5 pieces of Burning Spellweave. This is obviously one of the best damage sets for Magicka Dragonknights. It increases our spell damage by almost 500 for 8 seconds with a cooldown of 12 seconds, meaning it is up 8 seconds, then down for 4, and then can be up yet again. And this patch, it no longer has a proc chance on the set, meaning the first time you deal flame damage to an enemy and it is not on cooldown, you will instantly get the buff active. Meaning, if you have Burning Spellweave only on the front bar like we have on this build, it is enough for the cooldown to drop for just 1 second and one of your DK flame dots tick on one enemy and you instantly get Burning Spellweave effect. So it is really going to be on cooldown. 8 out of every 12 seconds we will be having the set active. 2 out of every 3 seconds in average, which is absolutely fantastic to have the 500 spell damage for. On the back bar, we are using 5 pieces of Bloodthorn. Bloodthorn is a great sustain set that got buffed a lot this patch. Our 5-piece effect of this set basically gives us 1k Magicka and stamina, which can happen once every 5 seconds. For this set to work, it requires a direct damage to be dealt. And on the back bar, we have multiple ways to apply that direct damage. In fact, one of them even allows us to apply a direct damage back to our enemies while just standing on the back bar and holding block without even casting an active skill, and still we can proc this. The great thing about Bloodthorn is that it does not give you just regens. Unlike something like Eternal Vigor that is very common on MagDK nowadays, that set requires you to regen your stamina instead of giving you a flat amount of stamina. Bloodthorn gives you a flat amount, and what that means is that you can hold block and still keep getting the resources back from Bloodthorn every 5 seconds on cooldown, where on sets like Eternal Vigor, the moment you hold block, your stamina recovery goes to 0 and you stop regenerating it, as is with the block mechanic, and Eternal Vigor becomes completely useless in that given moment. So I really enjoy Bloodthorn. It is a set that we can put only on one bar. We can put it either on the front or the back. I chose to put it on the back bar, but if you don't have a Burning Spellweave staff, you can really swap these two out and have your Bloodthorn on the front bar and Burning Spellweave on the back bar, and it is totally fine with this build as well. And it just helps us sustain a lot. Bloodthorn gives us a lot of stamina to keep our block uptime very, very high, and a lot of Magicka to keep sustaining really well. In addition to these 4 different sets we talked about, we also use 1-piece Ring of the Wild Hunt. This is a great mythic item that allows us to have extra mobility. We also kept this mythic item with the Swift trait on this build, so this set basically gives us, even just in combat, 22% increased movement speed. So with Major Expedition, which we have on this build, with this item and with, for example, sprinting, we can get fairly close to the speed cap in the game, and we can just zoom very, very fast all across the battlefield, run away from damage, or kite around obstacles, or chase enemies even if they're very mobile. Even Nightblades using Shade to get far away from you, magsorcs streaking away from you. No matter what it is, you can catch up to it the vast majority of the time, and I absolutely love it on this build. While we are still using a couple pieces of Impen on this build, I feel like Impen is a whole lot less relevant than it was previously after taking 2 nerfs in a row in the last 2 patches. So we are still using 2 pieces of Impen on our monster helm currently, but can really be any piece of your gear, and the rest of our items are all sturdy. That applies to the 5 body pieces as well as the shield on the back bar to help us mitigate more damage by blocking, since it reduces the cost of block and allows us to block a whole lot more. Between the stamina return from Bloodthorn and having a lot of sturdy pieces, we're able to block a whole lot on our back bar and even well enough on our front bar to mitigate a whole lot of incoming damage and survive a lot better on this build. As for our weapons, on the front bar, our Burning Spellweave Inferno is Nirnhone to increase our damage, and it has the weapon damage and spell damage enchantment as well. If you feel like sustain is the problematic part for you with Magicka Dragonknights rather than damage and actually getting enemies killed, feel free to change this trait to really whatever you want. Charged is very recommended to make sure that you can apply the burning side effects a lot more to enemies and benefit a whole lot more of the combustion passive and gain a lot of sustain. It is something that you can certainly do, and I also have a burning spellweave staff which is charged and I've been using a lot as well. However, I recommend running the Nirnhound. I really like it because it allows me to have a lot more damage to kill my enemies. On the back bar, we are running the shield is with Magicka, enchantment, and sturdy, as I've mentioned, and we are using a poison that basically just deals poison damage to enemies. You don't need any additional effect on that. You can use any poisons that deal poison damage to enemies, because the goal of that is once again to proc the combustion passive, but this time on the stamina part. When you deal poison damage to an enemy, you restore stamina, and that allows you to generate more stamina even while blocking and be able to mitigate a lot more damage through blocking a whole lot more time. I'll also go over each and every single one of my other pieces so you can see the trait and enchantment I've got on everything. And with that, let's go into our skills and discuss what we're using this patch. On the front bar, we are using Burning Embers. This is a great flame-based dot that deals a lot of damage over a long duration to an enemy, and then whenever the effect ends or you recast the skills, it heals you for a massive portion of the total damage done. The great thing about this skill in a 1vx scenario is that you can apply it to multiple enemies, and whenever any of the effects on any of the enemies runs out, or whenever you recast it on any of the enemies you already cast the dot on previously, you get the chunk of health right back to you, so you can get a lot of healing done on the front bar without having to go to the back bar to heal yourself and stopping the aggression. Next, we are using Molten Whip. A lot of MagDKs have been using the other morph Flame Lash throughout this patch because, let's face it, healing is really important this patch and very hard to get effective healing on a MagDK this patch. However, I still prefer Molten Whip. This is a great bursty skill that allows you to take enemies down with one massive swing they don't typically see coming. You can buff yourself up, apply a few dots to your enemies, and then leap them into a fully procced Molten Whip and get a whole lot of damage done. In addition to Molten Whip being such a great burst skill, the Seething Fury buff that it allows you to have while it is slotted on your bar is really great at amping up your spell damage, which allows you to deal a lot of additional chip damage to enemies before you go on with your burst, just by using your additional dots. Next up, we are using Flames of Oblivion. It is a great skill as well for a 1vx scenario. A lot of people tend to look at it as a buff that you have on yourself that deals damage every 5 seconds to enemies, and while that is the case, it is also a really effective spammable. It is one of the most affordable damage skills on MagDK. It's costing less than 2k, and it deals quite a significant amount of damage when you're fully buffed up to 2 different enemies. It is like a spammable that deals damage to multiple enemies, which is super relevant this patch, because not only in the scenarios when you're outnumbered and it deals damage to multiple enemies you're fighting, but also even if you're fighting, for example, a pet Sorc or anyone using Engine Guardian, it won't hit just the Engine Guardian like happens a lot of time when the enemy attempts to line of sight, but it will hit both the pet and the person using it, which is very effective, especially fighting versus classes that use pets like Sorcs or anyone using Engine Guardians, as I've mentioned before. In addition to being a great spammable and a great activation to Molten Whip for your burst, it also gives you Major Prophecy, which increases your spell crit, which is very important because we are not using Malacath on this build. Next, we are using Fossilize. It is one of the strongest stuns in the game. The only stun that is probably stronger than Fossilize is Streak, because it is, well, let's face it, one of the most broken skills in the game, but Fossilize is still a very effective CC. It is quite expensive, however, it stuns an enemy for 3 seconds, they take additional damage when they break free, and they're immobilized afterwards for 3 seconds, so if an enemy wants to run away from you, this forces them to both break free and roll dodge or use a skill that removes immobilities, and it is just a fantastic stun since it cannot be blocked or dodged, so it gets really anyone, whether they're perma blockers, they're rolling away from you, it doesn't matter, they get CC'd by it. Next, we are using Elemental Drain. It is a great skill for both damaging and sustaining because it applies Major Breach to enemies, which increase your penetration against them because it reduces their resistances by 5.3k, which is a whole lot. But in addition to that, it also applies Minor Magicka Steal to an enemy, meaning that every second you deal damage to them, you get 300 Magicka right back to you. So it is effectively 600 Magicka regen, as long as you have a dot active on an enemy that can tick every single second, which obviously with a MagDK build like ours, you do. Our ultimate on the front bar is Ferocious Leap, as is to be expected. A great ultimate, deals a whole lot of damage to enemies, multiple enemies, knocks them all back and stuns them, and it gives you a damage shield. Alongside that, it also, because you are a Dragonknight, gives you resources back, whether it is health you need, Magicka, or stamina. You get it all by using your ultimate. And Leap is a fantastic ultimate because it is fairly cheap, fairly effective. You can build it up very, very fast, and then you can go in with a Leap to catch up to your enemy, CC them into a Molten Whip combo to get the kill done. It is just really, really effective to do, especially when an enemy is attempting to run away from you, or when an enemy is in melee range and is not prepared to be knocked back with a big burst coming out of nowhere, because when you are in a melee range, your Leap is very, very immediate. Even though it does have a minimal duration now, which is a slight nerf to the skill, it is still a very, very effective ultimate to use. On the back bar, we are using Degeneration. This slot is more of your flex spot, because if you want to use spell power potions, which you certainly can with this build, you can use really anything on this slot. Skills that I think are notable other than Degen that you can use here are both Draw Essence, which is a really nice skill, especially after the buff it got this patch, and also Meditate from the Sigik skill line, which I have used quite a bit on that spot as well. But currently I am using Degeneration. It is a great way, or well, the only way to get your major sorcery effectively through a skill at this point. It deals a dot to your enemy, which also, you know, helps you chip a little bit more of their health, but we mainly use it just for the major sorcery you get from it. Next, we're using Engulfing Flames. This is obviously a fantastic skill to deal increased damage to your enemies. This is an AoE dot that you apply to multiple targets, and when they are applied by this debuff, you are able to deal 10% extra bonus damage to your enemies. I know the current value currently shows 8%, but that is only because we are currently completely unbuffed. But in combat, it will always be 10% and above, even if you're just partially buffed. Next, we are using Coagulating Blood. This skill got buffed finally this patch and now gives you a whole lot more health than it used to before, especially when your health is lower than 50%. It now gives you a very, very decent amount, and while Coagulating Blood is a very expensive heal, it is a very effective one now as well. It's not insane. It is still worse than, for example, Breath of Life, Honor the Dead on Templars, or most of the spammable burst heals that any class has, to be honest, but it is what you got on MagDK, and it is fairly effective this patch in comparison to what it was in a previous patch. A really great oh shit button. I don't recommend spamming it to stay alive. You can cast it a couple times if you need to, but I really recommend relying on Burning Embers for your heals for the most part, or utilizing your ultimate to get health back. Coagulating Blood is really that oh shit, I'm taking too much damage, I need to keep myself alive kind of button. Next up, we're using Race Against Time. Great skill that gives you a whole lot on this build. It gives you Major Expedition, it gives you Minor Force, and it gives you that immunity to snares and immobilizations, and removes all the ones that are currently applied. So one skill that gives you a whole lot, both offensively, defensively, with the speed and the mobility. And yeah, just great to have on your bars, especially since we're benefiting so much from our movement speed with our Wild Hunt Mythic piece, and since we're benefiting from our crit a lot, we have a very high crit value. Next, we're using Volatile Armor, which is our major resolve buff. Super important to have on any build you play, no matter what. And it is the one that MagDKs have. It is really nice because it deals damage to enemies around you when they attack you as well. And it is a very, very effective way for you to be able to keep sustaining off of Bloodthorn set. Because whenever an enemy deals damage to you in close range, Volatile Armor procs back at them, dealing direct damage to them, which activates your Bloodthorn. So if you have this buff active, you can just sit in block, and when enemies approach you and try to damage you, they proc your Bloodthorn set without you casting literally any ability, just by being on the back bar holding block. And our ultimate on the back bar is Temporal Guard. We don't use it a lot. It is a very, very buggy ultimate, and I don't recommend using it too much, especially on Magicka Dragonknights, since you do not benefit from your Battle Roar passive when you use this ultimate. However, it is really effective to have slotted just to have minor protection, which reduces your damage taken by 8% as long as you persist on your back bar. So really, we're able to stay on the back bar holding block for a very long amount of time with all of our sturdy pieces and with volatile armor proccing our Bloodthorn proc. And then we get a whole lot of stamina coming back. We have our Temporal Guard to mitigate even more damage. We can tank out a lot of damage on the back bar, and then whenever we want to, we buff ourselves up, debuff the enemy with Degen and Engulfing Flame, swap over to the front bar, apply a couple dots, cast Flames of Oblivion a few times to chip off their health, and then finish it up with a leap into a Molten Whip combo, killing our enemies, whether it's one by one or group by group. Very, very effective, both defensively and offensively. These are practically my rotations, and I hope you'll find them effective as well. Next up, we are going to go over and discuss our champion points. I'm going to go over every single one of my trees and basically show you what I am running. Feel free to pause the video at any given moment if you would like to see exactly the stars I have in each tree. Next, for some more relevant pieces of information, we are using the Lady Mundus on this build. We are using a light armor build, and that means that we want to have as much physical and spell resistance as possible. And despite Lady being a little bit weaker than it used to be in the past, it is still a whole lot of resistances that we get from it. 3k resistances, both physical and spell, are very, very nice and help us survive really well even when our blood spawn is not currently procced. For our food, we are using the Bewitched Sugar Skulls, which give us tri-stat as well as health recovery, which obviously is very nice to have on Magicka Dragonknights. For our potions, we are using really any tri-stat potions. It can be crafted tri-stat potions, it can be crown tri-stat potions. They give practically the same value. And I am also using quite a bit of spell power pots whenever I replace my degeneration with any other skill that I want to put on the flex spot. I also use Essence of Detection a lot of times to fight versus Nightblades. Very effective to have quite a bit as well. As for Vamprism, we are not currently running it in this patch. I do not recommend being a vampire right now as Magicka Dragonknights. I love Vamprism on my Magplar, but on MagDKs I feel like your sustain is not good enough to pull off Vamprism. Since Vamprism this patch and since the last patch no longer provides additional sustain but instead takes away from your sustain by making your skills cost more, I do not recommend running it. While Mistform is very, very effective to kite and stay alive, we're able to use our speed with our Race Against Time as well as our Wild Hunt Ring to keep mobile and move away from aggro if we need to kite and stay alive, stabilize our resources, and heal ourselves. And so I don't feel like Mistform is needed, and Vampirism is really not recommended by me on this build. As for races, we are currently playing a Breton. I really like Bretons this patch and for quite some time now, and really all my Magicka characters, because the cost reduction by 7% to all your Magicka based abilities is super, super huge, especially on Dragonites, which have the most expensive skills in the whole game, more than any other class except maybe Magicka Wardens, which are a good competition. So I really, really feel that Breton is worth it. However, I really like Dark Elf quite a bit as well for Magicka Dragonknight. So if you want to play as Dark Elf, you can totally do that too, but then I would recommend changing one spell damage jewelry into a regen jewelry to sustain a little bit better on this build. As for people who do not have the ability to get the Wild Hunt Ring because they do not have the Greymoor expansion, if you do not want to run the Mythic or are unable to, what you can do is use one more piece of either Burning Spellweave or Bloodthorn on your body instead of Armor of the Trainee one piece that we have, and then replace the jewelry piece that you replace and put on the body, and replace the Wild Hunt Ring, both of these, with a two-piece set. It can be willpower for a little bit of better offensive stats. It can be potentates for a little bit of mitigation, even though the set got nerfed this patch. Any two-piece that you wish, you can use on these slots instead. And that's about it. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this build video and would like to use a similar build yourselves, or at least took some inspiration from my build. If you enjoy my content, please make sure to like this video and subscribe to watch more of my future videos. I intend to release a whole lot of builds throughout this patch, and obviously for future patches as well. And if you guys would like to see more of my content, I will have links down below in the description and the comment sections to both my Discord server, where you can catch up with me or ask me any questions outside of this video. So anything that was not clear in here, or any other questions you have, any requests, anything really, you can go into the Discord and ask over there. We also have a very active community in this Discord that is very willing to help with really anything you might need. And also my Twitch channel, I'm live streaming ESO 5 times a week, every single week. And if you'd like to see me PvPing live with this build and many others on multiple classes, then feel free to check me out over there. Link will be in the description once again. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. So stay tuned. A lot more builds are coming up. Going to be releasing my Magden build as well as my Magplar, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned for those, and until next one, have a great day, everybody.